Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Bank. I'm John Boytnott, your host. We are an interview podcast show that dives into everything finance, from traditional banking and fiat currency to blockchain, DeFi, and the technologies that are powering our financial landscape these days. Thanks for joining me. Today we have Rishi Oberoi, leader in building banking functions at different companies, all in Silicon Valley and other locations. Coming to us from Danville. Hi, Rishi. How are you?
Hi, John. I'm good. Thanks for having me. And,
Great to have you on the show. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're working on these days.
yeah, absolutely. I'm a builder at heart, John. I like building finance systems from ground up. It's something I've been doing for a couple decades. And I'd say what I bring to the table is pretty much turning chaos into repeatable systems that people love and are proud to run. I've spent 2 decades in the global finance arena doing banking, fintech, both operationally, consulting, treasury, audits, like you name it from a finance standpoint, I've done it. And yeah, I just love the space, and that's what I do professionally.
That's fantastic. Working at the different companies that you've worked at. You've mentioned when we talked before, and also in reading about you, that you shifted away from a numbers-driven approach to what you do to more of a people-driven style of leadership. And so, how does that show up in the way that you build financial teams and get rid of the chaos at companies these days?
Yeah, that's a good question, John. I'd say maturity evolves me into a different person over time. And especially, I think, within banking itself, just having gone through a couple of banking crises in the market and seeing how that impact people, my thought process evolved, and just having teams of a couple of dozen people plus, I quickly realized that treating everybody the same is not the best way to get the most out of people. And, early in my careers, in my 20s and early 30s, I was I'm still a very passionate person when it comes to work, but I was focused more on output and seeing the results, and I've evolved more into focusing on the process. Um, and that process entails making sure the people who are there to help support us are also accountable, responsible, and are motivated enough to drive the ultimate outcome. So I say this to my teams usually, and I've learned this over time, is that if I have to catch every ball, I pick the wrong field. And that's important to me because picking the right team is what drives the process and the ultimate outcome, right? So from my perspective, changing my mindset from outcome driven, numbers driven aspect to really leading with empathy and knowing who my team members are and what they bring to the table has helped me get more out of my team than I otherwise would have. There's a saying that says, like, everyone is going through a personal battle that you know nothing about. And that is so true because, some of my high performers in my early career in my teams, I've seen them have off days. And in the beginning, to me, it was a question like, why is so and so not delivering, right? And I never understood that people carry their lives they bring their lives to work as well, their personal lives, and they take their work life back to their personal lives as well. And I think it's important for people to understand that, and especially leaders, to be empathetic towards who their team is and who every individual is in order to get the most out of them. So that's what's changed. And I think it's just changed as a result of, it wasn't an overnight change. It just changed over time, and just having the right people who reminded me what matters the most.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, you had mentioned when we talked before, you'd mentioned about the 2023 sort of mini banking crisis that occurred with Silicon Valley Bank. And there was a lot of scrambling that was going on back then, and you were staying calm as best you could during that time. And so, when you were working with your teams then, and in that area, what were some mental, what was like a key mental framework, I suppose, or process that you used to stay calm and to help your team stay calm during that? Talk about that time too, because remind everyone who's maybe it's faded a little back into history, what it took to stay calm during that
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. I remember that vividly, that time period, just because of the chaos it created, and because it happened so suddenly on a Friday.
Yeah.
Um, you I start by saying I'm an aspiring Stoic, and I say aspiring because I'm human, so I will make mistakes. Um, but I've followed the philosophy, and I continue to practice it in my daily routine. And something that I've been known for, and I feel proud of, is just being the calm voice in the room and staying calm when there is chaos. Because the only way to think through a chaotic situation is for someone to have their head above their shoulders
Yeah.
and lead at the time when leadership is needed. So me panicking along with everybody else was not going to drive the results that were needed. So when that happened, in it wasn't just people around me, but colleagues, ex-colleagues, and just the industry and all of that, and LinkedIn and all the news media, they were all blowing up about what was going on, and rightfully so, because some companies' payroll was at risk, and actually some people didn't get paid for days. But in order to get out of it, I think just staying calm. And at the time, I'd say people were starting to question me, to saying, "Are you not realizing the weight of the situation? Is that why you're not, so moved?" Like, they didn't use the word panic, but they were, when people panic, they expect everybody else to panic alongside with them. And to me, I knew exactly what was going on, and that's just my style. And my aim there was to lead my team and get out of the situation, and we successfully did. We had zero impact from the crisis on ourselves, and I think that was purely because of the fact that it was me leading with a clear and calm mindset to first of all calm my team down, and then have them drive the actions that were necessary for us to come out of that situation. So I'd say it's just a calm mindset that helps. And I don't I don't wish these things to happen, but I do know that when there is a crisis and there's chaos, um, I tend to shine the most because so it's kind of like my, okay, this is my moment. I gotta show up.
That's fantastic. I'm sure the folks on your team learned quite a lot. I mean, looking back at that time, to just take a look at sort of the structural situation in traditional banking. I mean, what does that time sort of that mini crisis reveal about the structural issues in traditional banking, and what should founders learn from it these days?
Yeah, I'd say that 2023 time period was just after that whole liquidity pump into the system when during COVID and just post COVID. So there was still a lot of money floating in the economy, and I think it was just that some folks took their eyes off the road and let the momentum take them, and risk became, the balance between risk and watching liquidity and just managing the balance sheet was off kilter. And nine times out of 10, the places where you get hurt the most are the places which become your blind spots, right? So, just having grown up in the banking regulatory space and having done audits and controls background, what I do know is knowing what could go wrong at all times and having resilient systems behind it is very important. It's the whole population bias and selection bias theory, right? If you keep focusing on the planes that are coming back with the bullets, you're going to miss what's actually causing the planes that are going down. So I think that's what I'd say, and what founders should learn is it may not be an issue today because you don't see it, but you need to have it at the back of your mind of the areas which are going to have gaps, and that you're covered sufficiently without them somebody's paying attention to them.
Fantastic. That's great advice for founders these days on helping to shore up the what they're working on at their companies. But so now, speaking of that process of growing your company, now you've actually grown organizations to more than 30 times bigger than they were when you started working with them. What has to change for the finance function in a little small scrappy startup? What has to change if it's going to want to scale into a fast growing, bigger enterprise?
It's a depend. It certainly depends on what the finance team is doing at a small, scrappy startup. If you have the finance team just doing reporting and producing results, and they're not helping collectively drive the strategy, then scaling is going to be part of luck, right? You may just have tailwinds behind you and you're scaling, and that's okay. But when you are faced with challenges and you have headwinds in front of you, that's when having a good CFO and the key leadership in the finance team, and just putting a focus on where growth needs to be driven, that becomes very important. Like I talk to, just as my normal part of professional life there in networking, etc. People ask this question a lot, and I've come across a lot of leaders and executives who have their thought process in very many different areas. They want to do X, they want to do Y, they want to do Z, and all of those are going to be growth levers. And the job of a finance team and a CFO is to give direction, to say, this is the focus that we need to have. And I often say this, especially for an eccentric founder, I say the CFO is like the Watson to the Holmes, right? You have the Sherlock Holmes who's very eccentric and he wants to do so many things and his head is all over the area, but you need someone to keep him grounded and focused. And I think that's what's important from a growth perspective. If you have someone who's monitoring your direction and saying, you be the compass and I'll be your map, that's what brings growth.
Fantastic. You've got to find the Watson to the Holmes. You got to make sure you have that.
Yeah.
Great advice. Let's talk about your personal career and a choice that you made years ago that has helped to shape where you're at now. And maybe, there are folks out there who can and learn from the choice that you made. Basically, around 8 years ago, you decided to go on a more mission-driven path, over a short-term financial upside that you had seen. So, how did that decision shape your career, and how do you evaluate trade-offs like that in life today? Maybe some advice for folks out there who have a trade-off like that they're facing.
Yeah, that's a great two-parter question. I'd say, from a mission perspective, I was at a crossroads when I was looking at different organizations at the time, seven and a half years ago, talking to many companies, in fact. And I was struggling to understand the mission that they had. And really the mission at Varo, where I am today, was to really serve the underserved, the underbanked who were not being taken care of by the large institutions, who needed the most help and who were being charged exorbitant fees. They needed the most help, and that really connected with me. We can probably get into this in a different podcast, but it brought in a part of me while I was growing up and going through college, and I really felt I needed to do that. And with other organizations that I was interviewing, I never got that. And one of my key ways to test that because every company talks about mission. This is my mission, that's my mission. Um, One question that I have to validate how true they are to their mission is that I ask, what are the KPIs that you're tracking on a weekly, monthly basis? And 9 times out of 10, it's the same KPIs, which is ARPU, CAC, LTV, and gross revenue, etc. But if they kind of tell me one KPI that's linked to the mission, I know their focus is mostly getting to growth and more investor facing, which is it's not a bad thing, but it doesn't tell me that the mission that they're starting out with is part of their KPIs, and hence that's something that they're focused on. So that's the mission part of it, I'd say. And then to your second question, how do I make the decision, or how should one make the decision? I usually when I'm at such crossroads, or I'm just have to make a decision that I know might be impactful, I kind of look at myself as 10 years or 20 years from now and think about it. What if I have to answer that person about the decision that I made today? And in critical matters like mission, like, am I going to be the person who says, hey, I took the short-term deal, help me out for the next couple of years? Because eventually both paths will converge. But having done mission-driven work is probably a better way to leave a legacy, which is an objective that I have. So it depends, if you want to leave a legacy, you want to do good work and really solve for the purpose of life, I'd say that's one way to go and really be going after mission-driven companies.
Yeah, that kind of makes me want to dive a little bit more into the Stoic philosophy that you had mentioned because it's well, first of all, I'd say there's folks out there who don't know what that is. So if you briefly just tell us a little bit more about that, and then tell us a little bit more about how that ties into the decisions that you make for yourself and in life and leaving a legacy, that sort of thing that you were talking about.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about Stoicism, and there's this book that I carry with me at all times. It's Marcus Aurelius, who was the Roman emperor. His book called Meditations, where he used to write. It was a daily journal about his thought process and how he was dealing with situations, and it's a mindset. How I got into it was, and there's many Stoic philosophers that I could name, Marcus Aurelius, there's Epictetus, Seneca, etc. And how I got into Stoicism was when I stumbled upon Epictetus' quote, which was, Epictetus was a slave, and he was his leg was broken by the Romans, and I think the story goes that he was limping when his leg was broken, but he wasn't crying. And the folks around him and the other slaves around him asked him, well, why is this not hurting you? And he said, it is hurting me, but lameness is an impediment to the limb, but not to the will. And I think that's what drove me to dive further into the whole philosophy. And that's where I learned the Stoic philosophy is more about, be in control of yourself. Be what's not in your control is not something that should impact you, and just focus on being a good person and serve. I think that's how I would sum it. There's 4 virtues of Stoicism, which is courage, wisdom, and justice. And there's one more skipping my mind, but that's what I follow on a daily basis. So that's what keeps me calm. Like, my whole persona is out of that philosophy.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely some inspiration for some people to check out the very fertile ground of the Stoic philosophy there. We should head into the modern financial landscape again and talk about the technology that exists in the modern financial stack. Banking, payments, treasury, risk, the crypto side of things. Out of all the technologies in the financial stack these days, what do you think founders are still underestimating?
The more recent one, I would say stablecoins.
Right. Yeah.
And there has been a lot of discussion around stablecoins in the last 6 months. And it's getting discussed at the higher levels at the larger banks, and there's some startups that are focusing on it. But to me, that is one disruptor that I see, particularly from a cross-border perspective. We talk about the world as being one, but still from a payments perspective, there's still hurdles and there's still delays. And stablecoins have a way to solve that. And we're seeing the large banks do that and do cross-border settlements in instant payments. It's disrupting the Swift market, and there's still a lot of growth to happen there. But it's that's where I'd say that's the next chapter for finance. You had blockchain, you had crypto, and to me, the next chapter is stablecoins.
Very good. Yeah, the question that I had meant to ask you there was about the biggest practical convergence happening right now, and as well, the way that fintech continues to blur the lines between traditional finance, crypto, emerging digital payment rails, and my question was around where do you see the biggest practical convergence happening right now, and I think this stable coins is one of the main things that
Yes,
you're thinking about.
absolutely.
Okay. So, looking over in the next 5 years, what part of the money ecosystem, will evolve the fastest? Do you think that will also be sort of the stablecoin area or surprise most people, you think?
It will be stable coins. I think to me, and we can already see that in the developing nations who skipped the whole plastic card approach. Like whether you see that in Africa, you see that in India, the finance landscape and the payments landscape is well advanced. Like India has UPI, I think Brazil has a version of instant payments too, and it's cardless. So
Man.
the reason why the developed countries haven't been able to get to that level of adoption is because of legacy infrastructure, right? It's and the culture itself. Like we're just so used to plastic cards and we use them, but these other nations didn't even get to that level. So they didn't get a chance to use plastic, so they're adopting the newest technology. And to me, I think that's where, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, that convergence and just being a global wallet, I'd say, perhaps, and being able to make instant payments. There's no waiting 2 days for settlement. And the US is moving in that direction as well, obviously, with FedNow, that was initiated last year uh, to have instant settlements between banks. Still a lot of adoption to happen, but I'd say between stable coins and instant payments, I think that's where the world will be.
Very good. For CFOs at different companies in the space right now, what's sort of any parting advice or information you would want to make sure that you would impart to folks that could help them on their paths these days?
Um, I definitely, one thing that I want to share is always look at the long term. Um, you might have trade-offs now and then that you have to make, and you have to focus on the short term, but keep your eye on the ultimate goal, um, and try not to make those trade-offs for the ultimate goal, because addressing short-term results is easier than sustainability. So if you really want to be successful and want to be known for creating something and leaving a legacy, have a focus on the long-term growth.
Very good. Um, if there are any companies out there who want to reach out to you, get your advice or help, or hear what you have to say, or see what you have to say, what's the best way that folks can get a hold of you and read more about you, Rishi Oberoi?
Yeah, I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is the best way to connect to me. I do definitely get back to people who connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm humbled for people reaching out to me, for considering me as someone who I can be helpful to, and I think that's the best way. So yeah, I'd say LinkedIn. Just find me, Rishi Oberoi, in San Francisco Bay Area in finance.
In the East Bay. in the Danville area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rishi Oberoi, CFO and finance professional, we very much appreciate having you on Beyond the Bank this time around.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it very much.
Great to see you, Rishi.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
You as well.